to start the conversation. So I will give you 2 minutes to present yourself, starting with Lumina Mentari. So please, Lumina, the mic is yours. Feel free to present yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lumina. I'm currently the staff for Open Parliament Indonesia program in the House of Representatives of Indonesia. Very nice to meet you all in this very spectacular month.
Thank you. So Robin, would you like to intro yourself?
Okay, I'm not on mute. Okay, yes, hi. I'm Robin Treistman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament, the website. And I've been doing that for a really long time, pretty much since the website started, which is 1997. I started working there already. And I've grown together with the website in terms of my knowledge and my experience. We're always doing new stuff, looking for better ways to get our information out to the public. And I'm really looking forward to today's panel, and really thank you, Sarah, for inviting me.
Thank you, Robin. So Sabrina, would like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sabrina Vigneux. I'm with Xcential Legislative Technology. So we build tools, software to help improve legislative workflow, legislative data, and build application layers for really cool things to do with that data. I've worked in legislative legal technology for nearly a decade, with really a focus on building these tools for governments and rulemaking bodies that are really sort of technology focused, flexible, and ultimately with the objective of just making the whole process more transparent. And it's lovely to be here with you.
Thank you, Sabrina. So I am Sarah Fern, and I am the Deputy Director in Bússola Tech. And today we'll talk about making legislative data more accessible. So we are going to our first question, starting with Lumina. Lumina, making legislative data more accessible can have significant benefits at all, like promoting transparency in legislative process, which fosters public trust and also enable citizens to participate more actively in the democratic processes by providing access to information that empowers them to engage with policymakers, for example. With that, what do you think that are the other potential benefits of making legislative data more accessible, and how these benefits, in your opinion, can be maximized?
Thank you so much for the question. I think I need to provide a bit of context. In Indonesia, the transparency rate and the digitalization are very much different in Western countries. So access to information is still very difficult, but we are trying to push more transparency, more public participation, and grounding the parliament into what the public needs on parliamentary data rather than what the MP perceptions are or what the public should see in the parliament. So there's this kind of gap that we are still facing, but I think we as a supporting system in the parliamentarians, we would like to make data more transparent so that we can educate the public and make them understand their rights and the services that we provide. And we also would like to close in the gaps on those types of misconceptions so that we can also deliberate the kind of like decision-making patterns of our parliaments, make them understand how parliament decides on things, build their consensus. Because in Indonesia, the parliaments are based on consensus and decision-making process rather than voting or like in parliamentarian system. So here we want to better educate them, socialize on how decision-making process are in the parliament, so that they are able to understand from our perspective and closing the gaps between parliaments and the public. And I think transparency, of course, is the basis of public participation and aspirations for, towards how we want to bring demands and the issues are. But a lot of our process, because I think like Indonesia, it has a very active media, social media activities in our citizens, and a lot of the decision-making process goes through social media. So sometimes the parliament become very irrelevant, and the media or the information we provide became irrelevant because we're still at loss with the social media activities and our media dynamics. So we would like to provide them the main source of information directly from the parliament, and we would like the decision-making process will be directly to us rather than in social media. So that's more of our context, but I'm excited to hear from other speakers as well.
Thank you, Lumina. So Robin, would you like to comment this question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing it. It does sound quite different over in Indonesia in some things, and others it sounds quite similar. What you said earlier about being able to provide all the information that the public should probably hear, and not only what the MPs want the public to hear. We actually had an issue that came up a bunch of years ago, and again at the time when the idea of transparency really became really a value. And we had a situation where all of the information about Knesset members' participation in committees, all right, it was all, the information was taken from inside of the Knesset web, inside the Knesset parliamentary systems, and was put directly up on the web with no changes. It's exactly as it happened in the parliament is how it was, on the website. And there was a particular Knesset where there were 2 Knesset members who asked, they wanted their participation in a committee to be erased. In other words, they wanted to change history, which was, they wanted to say, okay, well, we never participated in this committee. And the question actually went up to the Director General and the Secretary General of the Knesset at the time. And the answer was no, we cannot erase history. That if the Knesset members were they participated in those committees, how they participated or whatever, people might have to look that up more carefully, but the dates that they were in those committees, that's fact, and we're not going to change the fact. And it doesn't matter if they want to or not. They can then, so here's the part of the social media, then those Knesset members, let them go and explain in social media what they want to say. But you need a source, even if, and here's what something I wanted to address, what you said about how so much of what happens in the parliament runs through social media. Yeah, but in the end, it doesn't really matter in the end what runs through social media, as long as there is a place in the world of internet that they can find the actual facts. And again, in the end, any Knesset member will say what they want, but if you look back on the Knesset site and the information is coming directly from inside the Knesset systems, that's the fact. What people do with the facts is it's something that we can't control anymore. But you need to have a place where you can say, you know what, go look at the Knesset site, and that's where the real information is. Whether or not anyone does that, it almost doesn't matter, but it has to be there. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Robbie. Sabrina, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about what both of you said, actually. It got me thinking about or sort of wanting to visit exactly what we mean by accessibility. And I think, we could say that there's really a spectrum of accessibility, from finding things on the Knesset website or on a parliamentary website. There's an idea of disclosing information or proactively making it available as text, or maybe also as data. And there's a distinction, I think, between the two. And I'm going to sort of expose my background of the things that I've been working on. And it's neat because it's sort of a different angle. I come at things from a different angle from the two of you. So I think it makes for an interesting sort of multi-dimensional view of how we all see this. And, you know, there's the idea of publishing bills, and I'm going to speak about legislation, publishing in bills online, which started, like you said, Robin, you know, let's say maybe in the 90s. And then that's sort of becoming harder and harder to say that this is making data accessible. Is it really making it accessible? Yes, this is a good thing. But how usable is a static PDF document? It probably looks like the bill did when we, you know, presented in a legislature and a parliament, but it's really a display mechanism, right? And if we think about this spectrum, we can shift our thinking a little bit and start thinking about machine readable format, open data standards for legislation. And when you think about making data accessible and open, using these open data standards, then we start sort of having a paradigm shift in how we think of it, because legislation itself is really a deeply connected system of information with pointers and citations. You know, there's a network of complex internal, external references, there are dependencies, and then there are layers of instructions for amending current law, proposed law, and it's a framework. And we have sort of a framework that represents this nonlinear system that's constantly evolving. So if we start thinking about this as data and the connection points between these, we're thinking about representing this as the dynamic information that it really is, aside from this static text. And that would mean really that we want information that is accessible, that is transparent, to really be discoverable. You know, think about real-time publication, think about it being made available as quickly as possible, as continuously as possible. That's current and that's up to date. We want to think about text that is, or data that is searchable, that's linkable, that really represents these deep networks that we have. Being able to find things like legislative history, that we can reuse this data in an unrestricted, or at least a minimally restricted way. And this begs the sometimes sensitive question of whether, you know, copyright serves as a barrier to this reuse, this accessibility. And in some places it does. I'm in Canada, and you know, that's why I say it's sensitive, because there are barriers to reuse of some government data. And how does this make the House's work or legislative work more transparent, more specifically? Well, I think it helps break down information silos. For the one thing, of course, it's a window for the public on this data that's out there, on this information, and that's transparency. But also within governments and within parliaments, we're breaking down information silos and making this information open and available. I think encourages collaboration and sort of linking across different data sets. Doing this also helps us build systems that have better interoperability. We can share data, we can reuse it more easily. I think it also sort of has this culture of quality data. Bodies within government parliaments can find it and use it more easily. You know, data we can't find isn't terribly useful, is it? If I have trouble finding that PDF of that bill that I'm looking for, and I can't find it, it's not really that useful. And I think the last thing I want to highlight, and it's something that comes with time, is that I think a strategy behind all of this is really important, and a digital strategy that really includes data governance. You know, legislatures aren't a single monolithic organization. They include sort of a set of organizations that often work really differently, and having a clear, intentional vision of how to produce and manage and share and store the data, I think is really important. And there are domino effects that include improvements in the way of working in legislatures by adopting this approach. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Sabrina. I really agree. There's a difference making data accessible and data really accessible, readable, and so on, and usable, and so on. So I agree with all exposed in this first question. So we are going to our second question of this debate, that is about user-friendly public interface. I would like to start with Robin. So Robin, a user-friendly public interface is crucial in enabling citizens to access and engage with parliamentary processes. thereby promoting transparency and accountability. However, designing and implementing such an interface can be challenging. And that make me go to the question that what are the key features of a user-friendly public interface in the context of parliamentary platforms, and how they can be effectively implemented?
Okay, I'll answer that. I guess my answer is going to be based on experience more than anything else, not because somebody taught me anything in school. And but I do want to say just one thing is that I think my internet has already gone down twice. So please excuse me if something happens. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. Nothing like high tech in Israel. Okay, so I think if you're going to ask me, the main thing is probably that I would probably say is to keep it simple. In the end of the day, we want to get all the information out there. And sometimes it's very complicated information. So the real challenge is to try to take all of that complicated information and present it to the public in a way that is simple, the most simple way, I should say, because you're never going to get it that simple, but it's simple in the simplest way that people can access it. And, it's no accident that still, the most popular search engine in the world and other ones have followed suit is still Google with one line, with one text input. And that's not by accident. And of course, with all the new AI stuff going on in ChatGPT, same thing. One line, you put in one line and see what you can get out of that one line, okay? Now, having said that, that's not necessarily enough. Obviously, having a simple search on any government website, any government type website, including all the parliaments who we're talking to, is necessary and critical. And then beyond that, the ability to search inside of the data is also critical. And one of the things that Sabrina had said also, if you're going to take the data, you can take any data and break it down into its smallest parts. And as soon as you have it broken down to its smallest parts, then you can present it back to the public in a way that the public can put the pieces back together. Now, what am I talking about? I'll use like some real examples. For example, we can look at the laws in a parliament can be a unit. Okay, you have a law, that can be a unit. You can also look at there are two other units that I want to address, and that could be a plenum meeting, okay, or a committee meeting. So here I have three units. All right, a committee meeting, let's use a committee meeting as an example. A committee meeting is actually very interesting. I'm looking at a little diagram I drew for myself here. It almost looks like a sun, okay? Because a committee meeting has all of these dimensions besides the time and the place and the time and place. Obviously, you're going to have all of the elements connected to it. They're going to be discussing a law, possibly. They're going to have background material. It's going to have a video at the end, a video file. Which can go to VOD. It will have a written protocol, and it might have a press release, and it might have all other pieces of information. It might be a research document that was presented to the committee. So there are all kinds of pieces of information that are connected to this committee meeting, and it's not only necessarily, it's almost necessary, it's imperative. It's imperative that each piece of this committee is linked back to that committee meeting. Okay, so in other words, if I go to a different part of the website and I see, let's say, research documents, I need to know that that research document was written for that committee meeting. Okay, that's another piece. Now, if I look at a law as the central unit, a law at the same time, I should be able to go find all of the committee meetings that were connected to that law, that in either updating, creating, or amending that law. And I need to also find all of the plenum meetings. And again, once I've found those plenum meetings and those committee meetings, I should be able to find the video, the press release, going back to that whole list that I said before. So it is really important that, again, yes, we have simple so that people can access the information as simply as possible. And you also have to have it as linked as possible. so that everybody can get to everything from almost every place on the site that is connected to that same thing. Okay, I hope that made sense. One more idea, by the way, about keeping it simple. There are two major advantages, by the way, of keeping the interface. I'm talking about the interface for the public to keep it simple. And one is the more simple it is, the more people in the world have access to it, or it becomes more accessible. Accessibility, and now I'm talking about availability, but I'm also talking about accessibility for people with disabilities. So people with disabilities can get to a page. The more complex the page is, the harder it is for them to get all of the information off of that page. So that's one idea of having an interface that is simple, so that everybody, and I mean everybody with any kind of disability can get to that information. And you know what, even if I'm going to say, not even if, let's say you have someone who needs to go scraping information, you know what, let it be simple for them too. Even though we also have on the site, we have OData, which, you know, or we basically have an API that everyone can get that information, you know, in a more complicated way too. But I'm still talking simple. And the other thing is that the more simple the page is, the higher up it will be on SEO. It will show up in a search much higher the simpler it is. And that I was actually taught in the course. That's not experience, that I was taught in the course. And no, actually, and it rings true, it's true. So from our experience also, but in any case, so yes, in the end of the day, that's what I'm going to be telling you. Let me just see if there's anything else I would, 1 second. Yeah, that's pretty it. Just have to make sure that as simple as possible, that everybody that wants the information can get the information that they want.
Perfect, Robin, thank you. I loved about the SEO tip. And I really agree, when we talk about accessibility, we are talking about, for example, people with disabilities, people with not good connections, people with different devices and so on. So totally agree that we have to try to make it simple. So Sabrina, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight, Robin. I mean, it's great because you're sort of the person to go to managing one of those websites. I would never have known that about SEO. So yeah, it is super interesting. And I had sort of noted down some of the points that I thought sort of were really crucial for a user-friendly public interface. And obviously, the first thing that came to mind was accessibility, but in a different sense. And a commitment to accessibility, and that can include sort of compliance with web content accessibility standards. I mean, it would be ironic for me to be shouting the importance of legislative standards and open data without highlighting sort of accessibility standards too. And, you know, this is device accessibility, screen readers, mobile devices, and so on. And responsiveness too of pages, so that if I'm looking at the same page on a tablet, on a desktop, a laptop, you know, I have the responsiveness that allows me to sort of comfortably read the information that's there. And something else that occurred to me as well with regard to this is that, and governments in general as well, is that I'd mentioned that legislatures are part of this ecosystem that aren't one single group or body. And these, or I find that these websites can often sort of reflect the internal divides that are clear to those people inside the institution, but not so clear to people outside the institution. And I find that, you know, we're faced sometimes with multiple interfaces that sometimes duplicate information, sometimes don't, sometimes have partial information. And that can be really difficult for people on the outside of legislative institutions or governments to navigate. And I think that there might be more than one approach to addressing it. And again, as someone not in government, I'm probably not the best person, but I can think of a happy path. You know, could you maybe integrate these websites, or at least the legislative data that they have? You know, that would help for a consistent user experience. You could archive old sites, you know, that might have duplicative information or might not meet these standards that you set out for accessibility. And I think on the other hand, and this is challenging with legislative information, because I think that there are probably multiple audiences with different profiles that are going to your website and looking for things in different ways and are looking for different outcomes. And that makes it hard, I think, to create sort of these really good user experiences that everybody, you know, that resonate with everyone. I think navigating, reading, viewing a bill or viewing legislative information, that can be a 4,000-page bill in some cases. How do you make that pleasant? It's difficult to do. Searching, like Robin mentioned, needs to be really solid, because often people are looking for specific bits of information. I also think of language. I'm from Quebec, Canada. We're a bilingual, Canada is a bilingual jurisdiction. Information is published in both languages, and I think this is important. If you can publish in things that are not necessarily official languages to reach a broader audience, I think that's important as well. If you're able and you have the resources to do that, plain language summaries of maybe complex things, I think, are very useful tools as well. And the other thing I can think of, and this is going even farther, are public access to maybe analytical tools. And the reason I think that is that legislation itself is not necessarily all that accessible. It's complicated, but sometimes if you think of amendments in some jurisdiction, you can't even really read them. That's a really huge transparency problem. If I'm not an expert in legislation and I found out that an amendment to a bill is striking a word and substituting another in clause X of section 400, or telling me to go find line 27 and strike the punctuation and insert a paragraph, this is going to be confusing. Even if I can't see both documents, there's a transparency problem there, and that's built into the system. It's been that way for 200 years, not in every jurisdiction, but in many of them. So that's why I think of bringing usability or accessibility to the next level by building tools based on open data, whether it's governments or private institutions, that allow you to have visibility into these less than transparent practices for amending. And I think that implementing all of this, again, there's the basis and there's the dream world of really neat things you could do, should be part of this broader digital strategy that I mentioned earlier. User research, journey mapping, understanding that the user journey begins before they get to your website. And both of you mentioned this earlier. The user journey maybe starts with social media. Maybe it starts with somebody acknowledging or understanding that, oh, I need to go to the Knesset website to find this information. This is the right place to go. And really sort of considering that entire user journey is how you expose this information, the best way to do it. And I think that stakeholders should be part of an effective implementation strategy too. Who uses this information, consulting with these groups as well, having feedback mechanisms that people can give feedback, support, training guides. And again, there's lots of things that you can think of, but I think like Robin said, it's as simple as you can keep it and just make it as good a user experience as you can with the information that you have.
Thank you, Sabrina. Lumina, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I actually want to comment from Sabrina's previous point on information silo and also Robin's comment. We actually have this big problem on information silo, especially we have 11 commissions, multiple parties, and we have 575 MPs in our parliament. So there's a lot of ego and a lot of lack of political will to open information because there's a high political dynamics on it. And if you check our website in gpr.go.id, you will see that most of our legislation are in PDF, but it's a scanned PDF. It's not an operational PDF where we can search keywords and certain legislation terms. And a lot of the fact is that most of our MPs are still in the older range, and so they're very concerned on the legality of opening the information. So every page of the legislation must be wet signed by the MPs, and then it becomes very difficult to build interoperability inside the website as well as in Google for our SEO. And it's also truly disheartening for example, if we want to, provide a more open information to the public, and they tend to close up their information. So what we did is we are planning to redesign our website, to revamp the whole system. And as you mentioned, we are trying to build a new strategy on this. And probably we need your help, or maybe we can consult other external factors for this, to see like the standards out there is supposed to be like that. And a lot of the help in building the strategies are surveys we build within the people. For example, like our website, a lot of the basis of our website are based on public surveys. And it's not only the design, but also the type of interface. For example, like scrolling. Nowadays, most of our, gadgets and websites are basically on scrolls, because it's more simple to scroll that way rather than, walking signs of that. And we also tend to really, really hard to convince them that simplicity is the better route that we have to take, because a lot of our MPs want to compete to their news and to their activities, and they made our website become more scattered and a lot of information going on, and the public feels like they're going to a labyrinth inside our website, and they don't even know, or they don't even know where the transcripts are, or the agendas are, and the conference are. So a lot of the process that we have is more on debating what the public need, and making it more simple, and also trying to keep everything in essential. And some of our tastes are also different between the younger generation and the older generation, because the older generation tend to like bold colors and complicated and really, I think Robin might know, and the younger generation will like more simple and more minimalistic type of tone. So a lot of that we need to build a certain consensus standards, and we did have like 3 to 5 different types of designs that we voted upon. And we also look to our competitors, especially we in the parliament have a lot of competitors from volunteers and NGOs who provide legislation informations, and a lot of political consultants also provide those type of information. So we want to also learn from them how they build that kind of like database, and what should we pay attention, and what kind of data we prioritize. But it's been a long journey, especially as I see like the youth part of the parliament is still a very minority, and even the staff in the supporting system should like it took a lot of convincing and a lot of process to convince them on the changes.
Thank you, Lumina. So we are going to a third round of this debate, and now we are going to talk about.
Sarah? Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Okay,
Is that okay?
You want to make a consideration about that?
Yeah, actually, I'm interrupting because I wanted to say, because I didn't want to forget, and it might not come back up in context. I wanted to comment on something that Lumina said. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Anyway, so Lumina, it's interesting because some of the stuff that you are describing about what your parliament is going through is very similar to what we went through years ago. And I'm smiling because, wow, we also went through that, and I'm trying. And so there was two things I wanted to mention. One is that there was a period of time that the MPs themselves, the Knesset members, it was really important to them, or so they thought, to put their own platform somehow onto the website. And with the advent, and again, we try to make it at the time very clear. And by the way, we had a meeting at the time with our counterparts in the United States Senate, who had the same problem at the time. This is going back to 2010, okay? And they had the same problem. And the bottom line was they came out in the Senate, they came out with a written guideline. Again, I don't know if it was voted on in the Senate or not, but there was a written guideline about what their senators were allowed to put on the site, what they were not allowed to put on the site. And taking that inspiration, we made it very clear inside of the Knesset that the website is not political. It's there for information. It's not there to forward anybody's platform, okay? Any party's platform at all, which meant, what does that mean? That means that every Knesset member has a page, and on that page, they have all of their their parliamentary information, all of the activity that they do, the laws that they either sponsor or how they vote on the laws, and all of the different parliamentary I'm forgetting my English. All the different parliamentary activities that they're allowed to participate in, basically all goes up on the website. Again, that's taken automatically without touching that information. That's taken automatically from the internal systems of the Knesset. And now it's so much easier now to even sell them on this idea that the Knesset website is not political, it is only factual, because they have all of these other tools at their disposal, such as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and any other platform that they want to go and shout their own political platform. Again, I'm using the word platform in two different ways. It's kind of funny. To shout their own, their own political views, okay, on any other social media platform that they want. And there's so much out there. And you know what? On our website, we give them links. We have links to all of their Facebooks and their Twitters and their Instagrams and their YouTube channels. But again, that type of information that they want to put on our site, they take it elsewhere and we'll link to it. And that's fine. And that, again, that became very clear, and they don't even ask anymore. It's not for years. It hasn't even been an issue of like, what kind of information gets to go up on the website. So that was one thing I wanted to address. And one other thing is what you're mentioning, that you have competitors, that you have other, the word competitors of other organizations that are putting up parliamentary data. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, we also had that. And also, by the way, on that same trip that we talked to our counterparts at the Senate, I was also in Ottawa, Canada, talking to the Parliament in the Parliament of Canada. And I was very impressed with the fact that it was all in French and in English equally. I can get back to that a different time, but at the time, there was an open platform. It might have been also Open Parliament in Canada. We had at the time another one called Open Knesset. It was not us, that was our competitors. They took our information and put it up in a different way that they said was more accessible to people. Well, guess what? Over the years, they stopped. Okay, they were very popular. Everyone used to go to them and see everything. And why did they stop? Because in the end, the information that came from our site, I guess, was better. Meaning it was the original. It wasn't regurgitated again. And so people stopped going to them, and they basically, that whole idea kind of stopped. Now, again, we provide the raw data for anyone to take and use and to make any sites that they want. But our main competitor, which was called Open Knesset, they said to us, we know the people. They said to us, you know what, they take the credit. We've brought you to a place where you've made it so user-friendly. You don't need us anymore. Great. You know what, however you want to put it, that's fine. But again, so my point is that when your website becomes friendly enough and accessible enough, those competitors are just going to disappear. Okay, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Robin. Sabrina would like to add something, because I know you were smiling. So
no, I was smiling just because it's really neat for me to be to view, sort of get the point of view from people who are working directly with those websites. And I think of sort of the constellation of websites that reuse parliamentary data. And it's funny that it sort of struck me that you both said you see them as your competitors, because I guess I see them as sort of complementary actors, I guess. But then I guess fundamentally, when you're doing this really good job of presenting this information and they have full access to that data, either via API or via bulk download or whatever the case might be, there's so much they can do with that from an analytical perspective that you preserve your central role as being the authority there to publish and disseminate this information. So it's a really cool journey from sort of starting out and having to grapple with parliamentarians who want to maybe politicize the site until you get to be an institution that disseminates this information and provides it. And it's neat for me to get that insight because it's not something I always see.
Perfect, thank you. So Lumina, would you like to complement these tips and the considerations of Robin and Sabrina?
Yeah, because we mentioned as competitors because sometimes our MPs or the public and constituents rather go to those websites than us, and they did a better job in displaying the information as well as analyzing and making it more accessible to everyone. As we in the parliament, we still have to go very thick bureaucracy process to just upload them. And we recently had a really controversial bill in Indonesia on the employment law, and it was a big bill that strikes so many crisis demonstrations, because a lot of the documents and also the proceeding of the legislation process are not publicized, and most of the controversies are caused by leaks, hoax, and misinformations. So a lot of there were leaks everywhere of the versions of the draft because our parliament could not keep it open and could not keep it live. So in Indonesia, we are very new and very sort of against live documents like Hansard or like drafts that are watermarked and all that stuff, because our parliament would rather publicize when all of the bills are done, completely done, and then there's no room for advocacies or participation anymore because the bill is already done and the information are open when the proceeding is done. So a lot of that came because this legislation, this bill were very controversial. A lot of the medias and also other institutions leaked the drafts, and it became this chaos of misinformations and hoax. And that's why I think that's the kind of like a security angle that we want to sell on opening and accessing, opening the access for information, because a lot of these bills goes through, a lot of controversies and a lot of conflicts between stakeholders and MPs, and highly politicized. So if we don't keep it open, we might cause, a bitter chaos between the public and our government and parliament, and it will create that gap of mistrust and yeah. As you can see, it's very exhausting every year, and every term we face that kind of conflicts and problems.
Thank you, Lumina. I have to confess that I love when we have this collaboration during the debate. It's fulfills me with energy. So we are going to a final round of this debate, and happily, because I love this topic and we could keep talking about it all day long, but I want to be respectful with your time today. So starting with Sabrina, we are going to talk about management and accessibility of legislative data. So Sabrina, partnerships and collaboration with others, organizations and stakeholders are crucial in promoting the accessibility of legislative data, as we are talking about, for example. So these collaborations can help to leverage the strengths and expertise of different organizations. And we know that technology organizations can provide tools and resources to make legislative data more accessible and user-friendly. In your opinion, what role do partnerships and collaboration between the legislative house and the other organizations plays in promoting management and accessibility of legislative data?
No surprise, they'll say a big role, as big as possible. I think that partnerships and sort of even events like this, where you bring people together from different backgrounds that share experiences, share insights, I leave every single time either having learned something or been introduced to a perspective that just I never thought of before, and that just expands your understanding of the entire sort of legislative ecosystem. And I think they ultimately open the door to greater cross-functional collaboration. And I think that's really one of the most valuable tools we can equip ourselves with when it comes to addressing and breaking down complex problems. Legislation, how it's managed, published, updated, shared, is one of these really complex problems, in collaboration between tech organizations, civil society organization, government agencies, bring this diverse group of people together, organizations, and like you said, leverage their experience to develop innovative tools, resources for managing data. And I think that groups that create, potentially use data, consume the data, need to talk to one another. And it's surprising how sometimes that's difficult. It seems self-evident, just knock on another agency's door or talk to civil society organizations. But that's harder. It's easy for me to say, but it's harder to actually operationalize because, like Mina mentioned, red tape, because it's not in the culture, for many reasons. The links that are in the chain of operation are in the best position to lead the conversation and advise legislative institutions on best practices, approaches, and I mean policymakers, technologists, developers, lawyers, counsel, librarians should be part of the conversation. And I was trying to think of sort of a really good example of this. And I work with a lot of US federal clients in the work that I do specifically. And I think of the Congressional Data Coalition. They just changed names. It used to be the task force. I think it's Congressional Data Coalition, it's called now. And this is a really good example of a partnership. And I think it's right along the lines of what you're talking about. And this brings together citizens, public interest groups, trade associations, libraries, I think legal publishers, to really advocate for better transparency and public access to congressional information specifically. And the members of this coalition, I'd say, are really sort of a superstar group of people, organizations who deeply care about this, but they each have a different angle from which they have an interest or approach accessibility to this type of data. A legal publisher will have a different interest from, a civil society organization or a lawmaker or legislative council that actually writes the legislation. And bringing these perspectives together really creates a sort of brainstorm or a set of ideas that you wouldn't get had you contained the conversation within a singular institution. And I think they really systematically work together to break down these silos that we see everywhere and work towards improving usability and accessibility of legislative data. They do really impactful work in advocacy. They raise awareness around inconsistencies that are in data from a quality perspective, from an accuracy perspective, from an accountability perspective as well, and they expose this. They also have sort of regular meetings. They have all these mechanisms they've put in place to try and institutionalize these types of partnerships and maintain them, and really sort of move forward in optimizing accessibility for many actors in this ecosystem. So partnerships are fundamental, and I really think this is a good example of a successful partnership that advocates for positive change.
Thank you, Sabrina. Lumina, would like to comment on that?
I think we're still at the beginning process on institutionalizing partnership, as well as making a data forum for our parliament, because we are currently moving towards like a one data platform in integrating parliament data in a big database. And I think, but it's still very on the technical level, and I think our homework is more into pushing it in the political and policy level, in a sense, because it's still very difficult to push, work external works from partners from PMOs and CSOs that works with us. And I recently attended, and this is just before I attended this seminar, a workshop on legislative transcripts, and partnership were really essential, and especially our CSOs who are monitoring every aspect of our website, every aspect of our informations. They really know the percentage of how much we upload and the frequencies, and which committees and which MPs upload informations more, and that's really helpful for us to monitor, the publications and all of what our public receive. And our workshops really helped us in working what are the core problem. Is it a regulatory problem? Is it a political problem? Or is it a technical problem? I think in the resources and technical aspect, we do have it. I mean, like we are not short of money. We are not short of resources that can help build the systems, procedures, and also all the tools or applications that we need. But the problem is implementing it to every actors and stakeholders in Parliament is still challenging, and also making them used to that kind of technology, because it's very difficult. We provide our MPs with tabs, laptops, and they don't use them, and we provide them with applications and they don't use them. So these kind of partnerships with CSOs and PMOs kind of help nudge that usability, but sometimes it's just a factor of how to increase digital literacy and how to increase their digital awareness. And I think a lot of our partners, especially in the CSOs and PMOs aspect, still needs to build their capacity, because as you can see, like in Southeast Asia, I dare say that our democracy is quite declining, and the power of grassroots groups and partners that works with us sometimes are weakening, and I think that parliaments are less accepting of collaborators in these aspects. So hopefully we will try to navigate our way back.
Thank you, Lumina. So Robin, would you like to comment on that?
I guess I'll just say, well, first of all, let's start with there's this concept that everybody can learn something from everybody. So, as Sabrina said before, every time you go, you participate in one of these things, you always come away knowing something new. And yes, I always come away knowing something new, and then going back to my staff and saying, hey, listen to this cool idea or whatever it is. And so yes, as soon as you talk about any kind of collaboration, we're all going to come away with something new. And even something new might actually be, wow, I can't do that. That's not a good idea. Okay, but that's still something that solidifies an idea. So there are several ways I can just say I'm thinking about our own staff and how this works. So my boss, who is the director of the Knesset website, she is in a forum, which is a very active forum, and they actually have a WhatsApp group, and there's always something going on this WhatsApp group between all of the directors of websites of the government offices in Israel. And so they're always talking to each other. And we got to a point where about a year ago, we actually had a conference. It was really at the edge of the coronavirus pandemic. And it was really the first time that the Knesset opened up its doors to a conference, that wasn't only parliamentary. And we had all of the different government bodies come and talk about how they dealt with the corona. Again, that actually, it's even more than a year ago, I guess. It's already a while ago. Anyhow, the point is that, and now we want to put together, for example, a conference about how we're going to start using AI in our work on a regular basis, and what's out there, what we can do with it. We're talking about text, we're talking about code, we're talking about graphics, how it's going to affect our work inside of these websites, the government websites. Now, my role here, again, that's what my boss does. My role, well, I'll say me last. Our main graphic designer is also, she's on a bunch of Facebook forums and other forums of graphic designers in all kinds of, in all kinds of worlds. I'll use the word worlds because you're talking about government people, you're talking about private, in the private sector, you're talking about really anyone, students, anybody who is involved in any kind of graphic design and user experience, user interfaces. So she's on that all the time, and she's always learning something new and contributing over there as well. And my role is kind of more like on the international scale, because in the end of the day, our main inspiration is going to come not from a commercial website, but it's going to come from other parliamentary websites. And Sarah likes my my phrase that I use, where I go shopping for ideas. And if I'm going to shop for ideas, for the most part, it's going to start with looking at other parliamentary sites and not going to, I don't know, the latest, Shane site, where I do my shopping. Which by the way, we've also been inspired from shopping sites as well, in certain ways. And I hope that some of the stuff that we were inspired by there, we can inspire other parliaments with some interesting interfaces. In any case, my point is that in the end of the day, everybody in their own role can really search out and find outside of your own little comfort zone, out of your own little circle, and find your counterparts and gather them together somehow or another. And again, thank you to Bússola Tech for gathering all the people that I can get inspiration from. Thank you. And using that to really again, with the whole goal we have in mind in the end of the day is to get all the information out there to the public in the best way that they can access it. So yeah, that's how that's our collaboration in that sense.
Thank you, Robin. We love to connect these dots, to connect different legislative houses and organizations to have this kind of conversation, collaboration. And I also use your phrase like shopping for ideas, even in Portuguese with my colleagues. So totally agree. Well, we are going to the end of our debate, but before that, I would like that each one of you to give you 2 minutes to 3 minutes of final considerations about our conversation today, about our thematic today. So starting with Lumina, would you like to do your final considerations?
Could I perhaps go last, or just want to? I would like to hear.
So Sabrina, would you like to start with your final considerations?
Sure. I think I'm trying to think of sort of what to mention. There's a lot to say, and I was sort of thinking, going all the way back to one of the reasons why we talk about accessibility of legislation and why we're having the conversation in the first place, and why we grapple. And again, my background is legislation. I know parliamentary data is much broader than that, but I think it does tie together. And one of the things that I understand but drives me crazy is that legislation and related documents are really deeply attached to this paper paradigm. Deeply, and Lumina mentioned wet signatures, scanned PDFs, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's perfectly normal, acceptable that you want to have a canvas for presenting information in a specific, standardized, coherent way. The problem is that this paradigm is enshrined in rules, in legislation, and is extremely difficult to change. Official versions of legislations in legislation in many jurisdictions are paper formats, you have to have a paper format. In Quebec, and I can't remember if in Canada, but in the province that I'm in, the online publication also is considered an official publication, the authoritative version, which I think is an important step towards accessibility. I don't have to rely on paper. But I'm thinking of all of these things that might get in the way of accessibility, and they're fundamentally tied to this paper paradigm that grips itself, is attached to antiquated typographical conventions, formatting standards. And the problem with that is that even the tools we build to put legislation online or to provide legislation as dynamic information, often it's still attached to this paper paradigm that we have a lot of trouble escaping. I'm optimistic that this might change one day, but it takes a lot of leverage, and it's fundamentally a political question, because sometimes in order to change that paradigm, you need to change the law, in some cases, the Constitution, depending on where you are. So it's very difficult to achieve this sort of paradigm shift where how legislation or documents look are no longer the central concern, but really become a byproduct, maybe of standards that you use to describe it, if we're talking about machine readable data. And I think that this is sort of one of the big blockers, and I would love to see the day where we can step away from this paradigm and really start thinking about legislation as information and data. And we're getting there. We're doing some really interesting things, but I think that we can do even more when it comes to open, accessible, useful, quality legislative data that can bring together so many different actors to build tools and create sort of a scenario where accessibility for the public and for other stakeholders, lawyers, librarians, is sort of the baseline. And I think that really our attachment to paper is one of those blockers. And everywhere I go, I always advocate for not ditching paper, but really sort of thinking of this information in terms of the dynamic information it is, and not necessarily static content. And I'd sort of invite a lot of other people to try and do that as well. And that's where you start opening up your mind or your organizations to the different possibilities that exist when we sort of break away from this paper paradigm thought.
Thank you, Sabrina. So, Robbie, would you like to do your final considerations?
In the end, my final consideration is going to be a comment on what Sabrina said. Okay. But then I have another acute story to tell, but I'll first, it's very interesting about what we say about paper. I don't know any of you guys, your ages, but I can tell you that when I was in 6th grade, okay, my school got a donation from IBM of the first round of PCs that came out, okay, personal computers. And at the time, this is, going back way back when, and at the time when personal computers started coming out, again, what you're talking about is, your desktop, all right? And I remember at the time, okay, so that was back then. And then a few years later, then when the internet really started, which was when I started working pretty much on the internet, let's say around 1994, 95, everyone, now I don't know who everyone is, but let's say everyone was saying, that's it. We're not going to need paper anymore. Everything is going to be digitized. It's all going to be digital. Everything, your bills and your and everything, okay, now that was back in, let's say around 1994 that everyone was saying that. Now we're now in 2023, almost 20 years later. I would look at these 20 years as really a transition period, because if you had a period of time in the mid 80s where everything was paper, and Sabrina, you are foreseeing a time when nothing is paper, okay, or very little is paper. If you look at the difference between then and now, the truth is it's really incredible. When you think about it, you get on an airplane, okay? You get on an airplane, you get on a bus, you get on you go to a movie, you go to a show, a concert, you have your phone, okay? You don't need the paper tickets anymore, all right? Again, honestly, I don't know how it is in Indonesia. I can tell you how it is in Israel and in the United States for the most part, in Europe, okay? But for the most part, paper is definitely disappearing. I don't have to see my electric bill. It doesn't have to come in the mail anymore. It just comes in my email, which is just as annoying. But anyhow, it's still, the point is that it does not have to be printed out on paper anymore. And I think that the how far we came and the how not so far we have to go to get to a point where we're basically a paperless society, it's not so far anymore. So Sabrina, like, I don't think we're so far from your vision. Okay. Now, in the end of the day, the reason, the thing about the paper version, though, in the end of the day, The reason that I think people are sticking to this paper version is because people seem to think that there needs to be a final version of whatever it is, okay? A protocol, a law, a bill, before it turns into a law, whatever it is, the final version. And so in everybody's mind, a final version once upon a time was that piece of paper of how it showed up in the book, okay? And in the end of the day, we still need that. You still need the source of what is that official, the official whatever it is, okay? Again, a law, what he or she said, it doesn't matter. There has to be an official version. And as long as there's a way of proving that there's an official version that is digital, it will happen, okay? Now, so I'm gonna lead from that to a story that happened yesterday. Yesterday, some guy on Twitter in Israel came along and wrote a Twitter, and he showed a video of a page on our site which shows the current makeup of the government. Now, when I say the word government, I mean the executive branch, the ministers and the prime minister. And he's scrolling and he says, look, wait a minute, but this guy resigned. Why does it say he's still here? Is the Knesset trying to do some kind of conspiracy that this guy he's showing up as a minister? What is this? Now, so yesterday, by the way, was a holiday. Okay, so I was off, and the Deputy Secretary General of the Knesset sends me a WhatsApp, and she shows me this. She says, "What do we do?" And then she sent me a second WhatsApp, and she said, "Well, you know what? We'll just deal with this tomorrow because it was a holiday." In the meantime, my boss and her boss and everybody else is dealing with this. Okay, and so as soon as I had a chance to look at it yesterday evening, I looked at exactly what the guy was looking at, and I realized he scrolled up and down. But he didn't scroll a little bit to the left, which showed the end date of this guy. It didn't show that he's currently a minister. It showed the date that he finished being a minister. The guy who was on the Twitter, now, we don't know if this was on purpose. We don't know if it was a dumb mistake. Now, if it was on purpose, that's pretty nasty. And you know what? With half of the information, you can always make a mistake. And the guy just didn't bother to see the rest of the information. Now, so we can learn so much from this that, again, and yes, you know what? From a user perspective, the fact that on that particular page, you have to scroll a little bit you have to scroll sideways also to see the information. Maybe we need to look at that. Maybe it's not clear enough. Maybe we have to rearrange the information on that page a little bit differently so that people don't have to scroll. So people can't even make that mistake if they, or pretend to make that mistake if they wanted to. Okay, but my point is that so here's the other lesson. The other lesson is no matter what information we put up there, somebody can distort it. Okay, and we do our best. So our role, okay, as the people who are working on the side of legislation to make democracy work, okay, to make a platform for the democratic process to happen, we can only do our best. And what the public does with it is already their issue, problem, or fun. If they want to have fun with our information, great. But my point is that we have to do our best to get all the information out there, and and let the public do whatever it is they do. And by the way, we did answer. There was an answer published sent to this guy. The spokesman of the Knesset wrote directly to him, which I think was actually better than to publish this publicly. Wrote directly to him and said, something happened. And you know what? He wrote back and he wrote back onto his Twitter and said, look, I made a mistake. Ready for this one? He said, I made a mistake. And I see that the information was actually there, but there's another piece of information that's missing. And the Knesset should be aware of that, right? Guess what? He didn't scroll down all the way. Keep scrolling down and you get to that other piece of information that he says is not on the page. Well, what can I do? On a cell phone, you got to keep scrolling. That's exactly what Lumina said before. You got to keep scrolling, just keep scrolling until you get to the information that you need. Anyway, so it was just an interesting incident that happened yesterday and today together.
Thank you, Robin, for coming with this example, because we always having to be with the user glasses too. So this example conflates this at all. So Lumina, would you like to do your final considerations?
Yeah. So I was previously attending a workshop just before this, and I was like trying to brainstorm with my team, and I was like asking, how can we make legislative data or documents sexy? You know, how can we mainstream them and make it more inclusive? Because a lot of parliaments used to be a really big boys club, where most of the stakeholders, most of our MPs are lawyers and people who understand these types of documents, only works in laws or in government, and is predominantly male. So when we try to in our support system, when we try to break down this information, as Sabrina said, and we try to break those changes in the paper paradigm, we try to break this information and really ensure its accessibility, that it can be delivered to the public, then that's like our biggest goal in here. And the biggest reform that we can do is where we can, ensure that all the data can be transferred to every aspect of the demographic, because Indonesia have like these various types of indigenous groups and age groups, and a lot of digital literacy levels are in various aspects. So we need to ensure that all the informations are delivered so that they can have equal rights in democracy, equal rights for participation. And I think that people sometimes taken that for granted. People sometimes don't look don't look too seriously on access for information. They don't look too seriously on how they want to deliver information to the public, because as long as our MPs, priorities are just to process the legislation and give a full document, and they're done. But they don't care if the message are received, understood, or even comprehended by the people that are targets for those policies. So I think in that sense, the level of accessibility that Sabrina mentioned is very important for us to measure, and that's why collaboration between CSOs and PMOs and people in the grassroots are very important. So to make them aware of what there are, who are representing them in these issues, and what issues that they bring into the proceedings, so that they could be involved as well in the legislative process. And I think that's that's our biggest goal, is just to break down and make them understand. Yeah.